This is the recording made of an 8mm film for my last flight from UK to Singapore back in 1947. The aircraft was delivered from England to the Air Chief Marshal in charge of the Air Force in the Far East and Asian Pacific region. And the films you will see here were recorded and transferred from an 8mm film. Here we are at the Lynham Airport in UK before leaving. My navigator and my wireless operator, myself, Flight Lieutenant in the Royal Air Force, and the aircraft, an Anson 19, converted one which could take 6 passengers, and was a later version of the old Ansons that had no hydraulic systems. Here we've moved on to Paris, our first stop, and we stayed a couple of days doing sightseeing while the aircraft was being serviced on its way before we could take it on down to the south of France and then on across the Mediterranean. You'll recognise some of these sites that we went to see, the Royal Opera House of course, and then interesting to see the traffic that time. Lovely old cars. How about the old buses there in Paris back in 1947? And the statues outside the Royal Opera House. Yes, we were having a sightseeing, my navigator, and we enjoyed the 2 days in Paris. Came there quite often before this in ferrying aircraft to the French Air Force just at the end of the war. We've moved on now, left Paris and flown south towards Marseille, where we again stopped, had a night stop. Remember, this aircraft could only fly about 4 hours with the fuel on board, and at 120 miles an hour we didn't get very far every day. Here he is, my navigator, relaxing, and there's me relaxing on the sign showing that Marseille was 55 kilometers from where we had landed. And we move on to the next step across the Mediterranean. We're going over to Rome now from south of France, and we stayed also in Rome for almost 2.5 days. The aircraft again having to be serviced. Here we go across the other aircraft is passing down below us as we passed over the mountains going in towards Rome. And here is the inside of this cockpit. Not many instruments compared to the ones we've been flying with later in the SAS. Here, me a big smile, and you sit with your navigator behind you and the radio operator on the next seat. And we've landed in Rome now, and going to spend a couple of days in Rome, and we do a lot of sightseeing in Rome because we're there, as I said, 2.5 days before we carry on towards India and Pakistan as it is now. Some of the famous sightseeing places in Rome that people still enjoy this day today. The crew again enjoying. There's the navigator with one ring, the other one, the pilot, was one that was coming along with us for an extra flight. He didn't was part of the crew, but he had been allowed to join us. He was being ferried out there anyway. And we're sitting down looking at some of the street. Mind you, these films were taken in 47 and now back in the year 2004 being converted from 8mm films to videos and then onto DVDs. So the quality, of course, has lost some of its fineness, and remember too that they were in black and white in those days and not in colour as they came later on. But here we are visiting a famous site. I think this is the Julius Caesar standing on top of his column. And the famous building there in the background, and then later on we go down to the Colosseum. Oh yes, we focus in on Julius Caesar. Some of these are quite dark. The Black Collier who transferred these has done a very good job in cleaning them up after so many years. But obviously the quality will vary depending on how the films were originally. Inside the Colosseum, I think, and outside this is sort of famous landmark of Rome. Part of the crew is busy also taking some films. Look at the camera in those days, one of the box cameras. Yes, Rome. Enjoying Rome in 1947. Yeah, I see the two half wings, and this is the extra pilot that came along with us. Came for the ride, you might say, but he was going out to Singapore, I think, that's what I remember now. Well, we've moved on from Rome and we're in Karachi. And the camels we pass on the way into Karachi. Buildings are very much the same in Karachi. The sites there are very similar to the ones I've seen there many times. I've been to Karachi since coming up to Thailand. Down the main street. This guy sitting on he was still sitting here when I visited Karachi many years ago. We've now changed to tropical uniforms, as you've seen, shorts and khaki. Temperature's gone up. We left in England, in snow-covered England, and we've moved on from Karachi across India to Calcutta, where we had a couple of days while the aircraft had to be serviced. Here we were armed, of course, and particularly warned in Calcutta to be careful because the relationship at that time with England was not all that good. They were working up to their independence. I'd been out shopping and buying a few goodies for my wife when I came back to England. And of course a box of cigars to myself. The traffic down the streets we were keeping fairly well to ourselves. And the rickshaws, of course, at that time, they're still there, I think, a lot of them. And we've moved on to Rangoon, famous pagoda in the back. Well, we did visit that. Take off your shoes, mind you, when you go around there. And we spent a whole day in Rangoon before proceeding on a flight down south of Burma to Mergui. And here we are walking down the main street in Rangoon. And we've left Rangoon, and we've left been to Mergui on the coastline. We just left Mergui. There we were refueled, and we found that we could not, with the range of this aircraft, get on to the next stop, which should have been Butterworth, where the Air Force had a base. It was the Australian Air Force also had a base. And here inside the aircraft, we had at Mercury loaded 5-gallon fuel tanks, 5-gallon fuel cans, and the idea was to find this airport at Phuket in Thailand, which the King of Siam had given the Air Force permission to use in emergencies, and to land there and then use these 5-gallon cans to fill up the aircraft and then proceed on as quickly as possible to Butterworth, where Penang is now. Flying over the jungles all the way down towards over the jungles, first off Burma, then down over the coastline, in over the coastline and of Thailand. And in the maps we could see that we would have to find 2 fairly big hills that were showing the approach into the Phuket place area. Here they are, and these we were told catch those and go south from there, and you should find the airfield several miles south of these mountains. You see the paddy fields in there too at this time, and a lot of water. Very few buildings, so isolated villages in there. Still along the coastline with the estuaries coming up from the river in there. See, we were flying fairly low, about 3,000 feet only. Now I think we have found the airfield that we expected to find. Well, it wasn't an airfield, you can see it's a flat area down there, which along the coast we could see. So we just flew around to have a look to see whether it really was that place. And then we found there were some buffaloes on the field, and we had to do a flight over to get rid of them. And now we're down. Some local inhabitants came out of the bushes to look at us. And here we are with the 5-gallon cans outside and busily putting on board. We had been told to be careful down there. They weren't necessarily a friendly area where we had landed. And the people around there probably never seen an aircraft. And certainly this, looking back now to 1947, was probably the first flight from outside Thailand to ever land at this grass strip. I'm told that this grass strip now is one of the main fairways of the Blue Canyon Golf Club in Phuket. So we left on, went quick down to Penang and stayed there for one night, and then from there we proceeded on down to Singapore. Famous Singapore building with the harbour outside. A lot has changed in Singapore since 47, of course. The rickshaws, you don't find them there anymore. The old cars, and the traffic, of course, very different from then and now. Here's the Abbey York waiting to take us back to England. Agreements in the ferry command that I was in attached to that if you did not get another aircraft to fly back within 48 hours of arriving, you would get on the nearest, quickest transport to get back home. And the 2 aircraft that they had ready for me there could not be made ready within the 48 hours, so I went aboard this Abbey York and off we went on our first quick journey back to England. The Abbey York was a Lancaster bomber that they had taken the fuselage off the bomber and put this new passenger fuselage on. And we flew here out over the water towards Malta, and we landed at Malta for a refueling stop. I was taken out of the window of some of the desert areas that we passed over on the way across. Singapore, across up over Malaysia, and then on to Malta. And here at Malta we found there was another Royal aircraft, the Ever York also, waiting for the Duke of York that was being flown back to the United Kingdom. It was raining, and quite a dismal day there, and we had to wait until he had gone until our flight could go on to England. The usual English traditional send off for royalty, all waiting, correct, proper, uniforms in place, all lined up, crew on board, waiting for the signal that he's on board and they can start. Standing under the wing, not to get too wet. Oh, now the final farewells, saluting, goodbye, have a nice journey, Your Highness, have a nice trip back. All according to tradition. Get on board. Okay, that's it. Up you go. Yes, sir. Goodbye. Big salute. Off we go. Okay, guys, get the engines running. Yes, and we're off. This Ever York is an interesting aircraft. I've flown a co-pilot on it a couple of flights in the Air Transport Command to India and back. As I said before, it is the Lancaster bomber with the fuselage just changed. The problem with this aircraft is it has the inline Rolls-Royce engines with glycol cooling, and it's very badly suited to flying in the tropics because as you taxi out there's no cooling, and when you get to the end of the runway the engines may be well overheating. We're inside it now, and this is 21 passengers can be in this thing, and it was used to a great deal towards the end of the war for ferrying people left, right and centre. In fact, some of the private airlines used it at the end of the war also as a passenger aircraft. Now we're coming over the coast of England now, flying up to Lynham for our final landing and the end of my final trip in the Royal Air Force. Coming back from the tropics to find England still snow-covered as it was the day we left. And now the wheels are about to touch down in Lynham. As I say farewell, thank you for listening, and that is the end of my years in the Royal Air Force.